Welcome to Stories from the Top. I'm your host, Lance Tanaka, and I'll be interviewing successful executives from the best of the best global companies about leadership and their journey. All right, how many times do you get to talk to somebody who's been in the coaching business for 18 years? 18 years. A lot of coaches you talk to, maybe a year, or they're just getting into it, but Jeff, 18 years. And Jeff Baietto is the host of the Enjoy Success podcast. He's also co-founder of Enjoy Global. And Enjoy Global is dedicated to transforming the workplace. Did I get that correct, Jeff?
Yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Okay, great guy. I've spent some time talking with Jeff, and I think it'd be great for him to share his journey. And, from the book Stories from the Top, we talk about the 8 common challenges facing leaders, transcends culture, country, level, industry. And there are 11 principles in some combination to be able to address those 8 challenges. The number one challenge when I run across executives and successful people is around purpose, right? Is finding their purpose, finding their place in the world. They're on this earth for a reason. So, would love for you to share your journey, because it's, you're living your dream.
Well, it's so true. And I was one of those that it took a long time to figure out and to find exactly what that purpose was. I'm from a very small town in Wisconsin, and the little brief background of my journey was in 8th grade ish. I had what they clinically diagnosed as a bad attitude, and
clinically
diagnosed as that from my parents. And to my dad's credit, instead of writing it off to those kind of terrible preteen years, he gave me Earl Nightingale's "Strangest Secret in the World" cassette tape, and I reluctantly listened to it, and then I listened to it, and then I really listened to it, and it was the first time I had ever heard anybody talk about the power of the mind and goals and the what created success versus not success in life. And I got hooked on personal development, and I listened to everything I could get my hands on and read everything. And I became the most positive kid in my hometown by a lot. And there weren't a lot of kids in my hometown, but I was the most positive for sure. And it set me on a journey of hoping one day I would be able to participate in that industry somehow. But it took me a very long time to get there. I ended up as an entrepreneur, was a partner in a video game industry publishing company in my 20s. And then that wasn't that was where the purpose thing, I was like, had everything on paper that it looked like I wanted. I was working with fun people. It was a cool industry, really creative people. But every 6 months or so, I'd wake up and I'd be like, this is not why I came here. Like promoting and marketing and selling video games. I love the creativity. I think but it wasn't me. And I remember thinking, I'm like, but then I'd get back into my life and it would be another bit of time. And finally I met someone who had a conversation with me, and she really opened my eyes to something that I didn't know was possible, which was getting my master's in spiritual psychology. That just sounded like everything. It just sounded like an amazing thing. It was in California. I was in Austin at the time. But after spending some time with her and learning about it, I looked into it, I registered. So I got my master's in spiritual psychology, and that's when I found coaching. And that was in 2002 and 2003. And when I started having my first couple coaching clients, that's where I was like, holy cow, like, even if this is all I've ever done is working with these 5, 6, 10 people, being able to be a part of their journey and for them to trust me and be able to be a small part of helping them get to be the version of themselves that they were looking forward to being. That was it was just so fulfilling. So that really lit my fire. And that's, in one way or another, over the last almost 2 decades now, I've been as you mentioned, in the coaching world.
Yeah. But when you said that you discovered this thing about positive early in life, was that always kind of out there as the direction of where you wanted to go? And then you just kind of went around it and then eventually to it?
Well, it worked for me individually. Like I knew that having a positive mindset and having goals and looking at the looking at the good in everybody and in everything. I knew that was helping me create things in my life, but I wasn't anchored in what I wanted to be creating. And so I was often, if I look back on that, I was creating things and trying to create a life that was externally defined, right? So what society said was successful, what I thought my dad in particular would be impressed with, but it wasn't something that I had turned inside and said, this is really what success is for me, or this is really what a life well lived is for me. And that didn't happen until I really did the work to look inside.
I see. I
Yeah.
see. So then is your coaching, is it centered around positivity?
Everything. Yeah. So that has become a huge pillar. And I think as positive psychology as a branch of psychology has really developed over the last, about that time as well. There's more data, there's just a lot of really good work out there showing how powerful it is when we start to build the muscle of putting ourselves in a positive state of mind. And that doesn't mean that everything is always great or that we like everything, but it means an orientation towards the world, that things are going to work out, or that we can create things that we want, and that we have more ownership and empowerment than on the other side of that, to an extreme of being a victim of circumstance. So to that end, yes, everything starts with that, and it's a consistent through line.
So how then do you reconcile between positive and negative? In that, yes, we all would love to be able to just focus on positive, but negative is also an important aspect, right? So how do you reconcile between those two?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first is kind of, I think, acknowledging. So it gets real deep real quick for me on this, because if we look at our life, when I look back at certain stages, if I was being honest, I was motivated. What was always happening behind the scene was anxiety. I was living from a place that if I got quiet, the feeling I had underneath was anxious. I was anxious. I was worried. There was fear. That was my default setting. And when I realized that, that's not where I wanted to generate from or live from. So are there things to be afraid of? Are there things to be worried about? Is there anxiety that's real and necessary and important? Yes. But to default to that, to look at life through a lens that everything was anxiety causing, that's not for me, that wasn't what I thought or hoped life would be. And what I realized with doing the work is there's a different orientation. And if I could clear that, like what was in there, I could start from a place that, again, worthiness. Most of us have an identifying issue. For me, it was, am I worth it? Am I worth my dad's love? Am I worth this success? Am I worth it actually? And what one of the phrases I like is, we can never get enough of what we don't really need. And so if I'm trying to fill this hole that I'm saying I'm not enough, so I keep trying to put stuff into that hole of I'm not enough, I can never fill that hole, because the hole is built on the premise that I'm not enough. So unless I do the work to figure out that and get to a place that I can reconcile, I'm okay, I'm enough, even more than that, I'm a generative, creative soul having this experience, and that's beautiful. If I don't get to that, no matter all the accomplishments, it doesn't matter. And I would be curious, in your experience working with high profile people who have reached a level of success that to the outer world, most people would say you've made it. So many of the people I've worked with, they have quote unquote made it, but they're not happy. They haven't hit that place where they really feel like, wow, I'm at peace with my life, or I'm really grateful for the life I've created. They're still searching for something. And when they've gotten everything they thought it was and it's not there, that can be a very frustrating point. And so I had that personally, and I've worked with a lot of people. And once, as you mentioned, once you get to purpose and you really say, well, this is why I'm here. It might not be what my parents thought was best for me. It might not be what society, deems as most valuable, but it is what gives me the most joy and fulfillment. That changes everything. Yeah.
An LT observation. Here's a quote from Jeff. You can't get enough of what you don't need. That is so great because both he and I work with a lot of executives, and we see so many unhappy ones. They're not leveraging the power of positive, maybe more on the side of negative. So, what's important for them is to understand their purpose, become an authentic leader, be more of who they were designed to be. I love that concept. Let me make sure I got that right. I'll have you repeat it. That you can't get enough of what we don't need. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you can never get enough of what we don't
I
really
mean
need.
that's a thought I've never really thought of that, but it makes so
Hmm.
much sense.
There oftentimes like there are those like pivotal thoughts, and it's like, wow, that really changes things. Another one for me, which when someone said this, I was like, if that could be true, that would really change things. And it was, what if the universe was truly conspiring for my good? Like, what if that was actually true versus the way I was thinking is, hmm, everyone, like it's not working out for me, or nothing really easily happens for me. But if the
Everything's
universe was,
against me.
everything's against me, but if everything was for me, then the orientation when a challenge comes, it's not the challenges don't come, but when they come, the orientation around that is, I wonder what the gift is in this for me versus, I can't believe this is happening to me again. Poor me. Why does this always happen?
Yeah, I love that too. Because that follows my philosophy around that. I believe everything is moving into your favor. If you just got to figure out what that is, what I call gifting, who you are, your DNA, and if you can figure that out, things just kind of gravitate. It kind of happens, right?
And that, I think, when we've all gotten, hopefully we've all gotten a little taste of that, where something just worked out, and almost like it was almost like people had been setting that up and just kind of like, how did that all happen? And we can't quite explain it, but there's a magic there. And life tends to work like that. The more we are in line with our purpose, the more work we've done, and the more that we have an openness to the goodness that could be happening, versus kind of trying to protect ourselves from a potential negative that we would consider. So I think you're right. If we get that and get clear with what's in our DNA, life can have these magical surprises or these kind of unexplainable good things that happen. And to people who are aligned, they tend to happen much more often.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be quoting you on those two things if you don't mind.
Oh, not at all.
Okay. Yeah, regarding positivity, because you work with a lot of people and you've done this for so many years, what are some, I don't want to call them tricks, but what are some key things people should really build into their life to be able to leverage the power of positive?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I love small things that help. And so, you know, uh, personally, and again, I think I can give a lot of examples for different people, but I've found personally, and I think it does tend to be a great starting place, is self care. When people start to make themselves a priority, whether that's their health, their physical well-being, whether it's their mental well-being, their emotional doesn't matter. Ultimately, we hopefully are taking care of ourselves on a lot of levels. But when we do that, when we're filled up, when we're working at we're not depleted, we're actually feeling good, our best self naturally comes forward. We start to be more creative. We start to just have better ideas. We're more willing to take a risk on a new idea that we have. And so one of the simple things I think for everybody to be able to do is what is one area that you've been thinking is like, oh, I'd like to take better care of myself in this way, but I'm just not doing it. For me, when the pandemic hit, I was very aware that I wasn't sleeping well. My quality of sleep was not good. And that was affecting my patience, my creativity. And so that had been my reality for many years. And I just had felt like, okay, I'm just not a good sleeper. And then I was like, but there's a lot of people who are teaching ways of improving sleep. Why am I not studying that? So I made it a game, and I started investing I got an Aura ring to track my sleep. I got some more supplements. I started to have a nighttime ritual of breathing exercise. I did a few things, and all of a sudden my sleep improved. And I'll tell you, that might sound ridiculous. Like, of course it improved. If you were doing things to improve it, it probably was going to improve. But for me, I had bought into the belief that I'm just not going to be able to get a good night's sleep. And now here I was getting a much better night's sleep. And I would wake up and all of a sudden my days, like they were better. Everything was better. And so starting in this way is taking care of ourselves and realizing if we give to ourselves in a way that we need to, eating better, exercising, any of those, it doesn't have to be all of them, just pick one thing. But as we start to do that, it tends to grab other things. I got better at sleep. Then when I was feeling good, I made better nutritional choices. When I ate better, I was better with my son. So I was a better parent. I was also, so that it's not in isolation. Even if we just do one thing, it'll tend to affect and bleed into the rest of our life,
sure.
our life.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a key point there is that you're making, or one of the key points that you're making that I get out of it is that you actually have more control than you think.
One of possibly the greatest gift we've been given as humans is that we can think independently of what's happening externally. We have that ability. So we don't have to be impacted or reactive to just the external. We are empowered to choose our response, to choose our experience. And that is a game changer. If we really get that at a deep level, it opens up a whole world of possibility.
An LT observation, small things help. An area that Jeff really focuses on is self-care. You need to make it a priority. You got to be able to leverage your best self, and that you actually have more control than you think. Take those small steps. They add up to a tipping point. Great. Okay. So one thing is self-care. Any other thoughts around that?
Yeah. Well, and I would say like a couple of things that have really been, I've watched, it does tend to come down to very simple things. I think when people, stress is the opposite side of this. So if people are feeling like people are busy, that is a reality in our world today. So they've got a lot on their plate and they're not making it up. They're juggling a family and a career and a whole bunch of other things. And so figuring out how to let go of that and really get back to a place where, again, this is in the self-care arena, but one thing that I think gets said a lot, like meditation or doing some of that. But for me, I heard that for years and it didn't mean anything. Specifically for me, I think YouTube is one of the best tools to use. There are guided meditations. There are little breathing exercises. We live in a time where we can easily have access to the best people on the planet and their content just by plugging in, to podcasts like this or, audiobooks or YouTube for videos and different interviews. So for me, the access is that getting around, like starting to figure out like, what is it that feeds your mind? So listening to a good book or a good podcast instead of the news, for example, like that's a big shift. Having, getting out and going for a walk or a little bit of outside time, right? I mean, we all hear it, but is it on our calendar? There are so many days I wake up, I go to my desk, I sit there 10 hours later. I'm like, how did that happen? If we don't put it in so making sure that our well-being is a priority and that it's scheduled. Ultimately, I guess my message would come down to there's a lot of things within self-care. I let go of coffee about 2 years ago. And I didn't realize how hooked I was on it. I love coffee. I love the taste of it. I love the caffeine. But I did a little cleanse. So for 2 weeks, I had to not do coffee and I got headaches. I had a tremendous, issue with that and realized like, wow, I didn't realize I was that dependent and I had been getting more dependent on it. And it also was affecting my sleep. So when I stopped, I'm like, I still like the ritual. So now I have tea in the morning and I have a little bit of hot milk. It doesn't matter. But if we start doing that, all of a sudden over the course of time, we're making incremental changes. But the impact, and I think you teach this really well, is over time, the impact can be really big.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that plug there, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, you're a master at that. And I think that's one of my favorite things is when, really great minds are teaching in a way that it's easy. It's actually doable for all of us. So you just do that expertly.
Okay. Thank you. Any other tips or, thoughts what people should be doing to leverage the power of positive?
Another one, my take on this, again, you hear it a lot, is, having a gratitude practice, a gratitude thing. But the twist on this that I'd like to give is, a lot of people say, write 3 things that you're grateful for every day or something like that. But if you do that, it's not a bad exercise. It works. But what I've found is, if I do that and it's just general, I can start to get, without thinking about it, I'm grateful for my family, I'm grateful for, but I don't really feel it. And what's really important is the feeling tone of gratitude. If we're not feeling it, for me, a lot of times I can do gratitude just in my head, but it's not in my body. So what helps me is, what's something that happened today that I'm grateful for? If that's the question, I've got to search for it. I'm grateful for this. And so when I start to do that, now I'm reliving the experience that I had today, and I'm getting into the feeling, because that's what came up for me. So now I'm feeling gratitude. And that's one of the biggest things I've learned recently, is feeling is the key. It's feeling good. It's feeling gratitude. It's feeling joy. If we just say it, it's not the same. So we've got to get our body into the into the game as well. And it has to be something that, wow, I actually really feel grateful for this, or for this person, or for this happening. And that feeling tone tends to vibrate out and starts to be the field that we're radiating, which is where we start to create from.
An LT observation: gratitude. We've seen all these things about gratitude journals, and they're great. But what Jeff points out is that it can't just be something you're grateful for. It's got to be something that you really feel. Feeling it is so incredibly important. Does this? I'm sure you run across a lot of negative people.
They're out there.
Do these techniques, are these the right techniques for those who maybe have a tendency to look at, the half, glass half full, or are there other things these people should be looking at?
So is it, if we're running into negative people, or for people who are
for people who are negative, for people, if you're coaching somebody who has a tendency to look at, this is not going to work, or glass half full.
Yeah. So it's interesting, because if someone's chosen into coaching, if they've chosen into that, there's an awareness on some level of them wanting to change and to grow, right? So no one's hiring a coach with the intention of staying exactly the same and just giving someone money for their time. So that's the opening, because there are people who, if they're not ready, if they're not open to it, like all the suggestions and all the ideas, that's just going to fall on deaf ears. But if someone's open to it, then that's where coaching really is beautiful, because if you've created an environment, and friendship is great for this, and any good relationship is, if you trust someone and you trust, especially that they have your best interest in mind, when their suggestion comes, there's an openness to it versus a defensiveness. I'm noticing that every time I bring this up, you shut this down every single time I bring it up. Is there anything more you'd like to share about that? Well, now I'm interested in their point of view, and then they can go into it. And more often than not, as they start to pull on that string, they'll get to a place that's like, wow, I didn't realize I really have a strong feeling against this thing, but it isn't really, they had to go back a little bit. When they do that, then they have more freedom. Now they can either choose to keep that, or they can choose to alter it in a way and try a different reaction or a different response. But if people are in coaching, they tend to be at least open to the fact that there's some changes that they might want to try on.
Great. Okay, Jeff, thank you. Wow, there's a lot of great stuff here in just a short period of time. So really appreciate it. Great, insightful 18 years of coaching. Thank you so much, Jeff. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, thank you. So on LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. It's just my name, Jeff Baietto. And then for just more on the company and what we do, enjoyglobal.com. It's INJOY global.com. And yeah, so those are probably the two best places to find more on me and us.
Okay, great. So you guys have to check this out. Check out his website, check out his podcast. His podcast is also amazing, and check him out on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Thank you. This has been so great, Lance. I really appreciate being here, and just really appreciate you and all the good you're doing on the planet.
Hey, trying. Thanks
You've
so
been
much,
dedicated
Jeff.
for a long time. It's really powerful. So thank you.
Okay, appreciate it, Jeff. Thanks. To hear more of our 2 podcast series, Stories from the Top and Tanaka in 3, check out our website, www.lancetanakagroup.com. They're also on LinkedIn, Spotify, Apple, Spreaker, and Google. Remember to discover passion, live your dream. Have a great day.